Hey guys, welcome to lesson 0.2, the basics. So in this lesson, we're going to learn to manipulate string variables, use assignment statements correctly. We're going to write a program to take user input and produce some output. And we're going to implement print and input, and finally use commenting and variable naming conventions. So let's start with strings. So values that contain any type of text, even numbers, are called strings. String values are denoted by single or double quotes. So you can see here bacon equals hello has been put in between double quotes, or rather single quotes, and eggs has been put between double quotes. Now we can store strings in variables just like ints and floats. So if we go over here to our terminal and we type Python, then we can type bacon equals hello and eggs equals world. And what we've basically done is told Python to store hello and world in bacon and eggs. So now let's say that we wanted to join these two strings together. Well, putting strings together in Python is called concatenation. And we do this with the plus operator. Okay, as you can see here, bacon plus eggs. Let's type this in. So bacon plus eggs, press enter, and you can see we get hello world, one word. Now we could put a space in between hello and world, but we'd have to, again, concatenate like this, bacon plus quote, space quote, plus eggs. Let's type that in. So we have bacon plus quote, space quote, plus eggs, and you should get hello space world. So what this illustrates is that there's a fundamental difference between how Python handles an operator depending on the data types that surround it, right? If you are adding integers, 1 plus 2, it does the mathematical operation of adding the two numbers. Whereas if you add strings, 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 4, 5, 6, then you end up with another string that has concatenation. Now there's lots of different types of data types in Python. And in this course, we focus on a very kind of small group of them, but they are the core group, the most important, most frequently used ones. Now it's all well and good to mess around in the terminal, but eventually what you're going to want to do is write your own programs, or another word for a program is a script. And another name is called source code. And so where we're going to do this is in the coding window. Now before we get to this, let's actually just create a file, and we'll call it 0.2 hello world.py. And let's put that right here under unit 0. So 0.2 hello world.py. Alright, so we have, actually, look, this didn't end up in my unit 0 folder, but you can just drag it into the folder and then it'll properly put it in the folder. Okay, so now actually what we have here is the coding window, and we can see we have line 1, means that we're ready to type a program. Now every time we add a line, okay, the line numbers automatically increment. And when you get errors in your program, it's these line numbers that they refer to. Now any code that we type in here is not actually run until we press F5 or run the program. Hence, it's called a script. We're basically creating a list of steps that the program is going to execute in order, okay, in the order of these numbers. So let's make a hello world program. And I've got this program outlined here. So we're just going to type this into our editor. We're going to start with line 1, this is a comment, so we'll type number sign. This program says hello and asks for my name. You might actually be wondering, Mr. Baker, why don't you just, give me the text so I can copy and paste into my editor? And the reason is, really, if you want to get good at this stuff, guys, you're going to have to type all this code out yourself and get better at typing. So let's type each of these lines. What is your name? And my name equals input, bracket, bracket, and print. It is good to meet you, comma. Leave that there, plus my name Now, as you work through that right there, you want to just pause the video and make sure that that you've typed everything exactly right. Literally, every capital letter and lowercase letter has to be pretty much the way it looks. Otherwise, you could have problems. Now, something else you might have noticed is that Visual Studio Code actually helps you type some things. In particular, if you type a quote, you get two, and your cursor ends up in between them, right? So, or double quotes. And every time you do that, even with brackets, you get both. So this is actually a feature of VS Code. You get used to this. Basically, you end up typing them both anyway, but it puts them in just for caution's sake. Yeah, you'll get used to it. So what we should do now is save our work. So let's go File, File, Save. You can also press Control-S to save our work. And incidentally, your program is saved anytime you run the program with F5. And there's a reason for that. And it has to do with infinite loops and problems that can arise later, which could cause you to lose your work. In any case, we'll talk about that when we start dealing with loops. But yeah, so our program is complete. Let's run it. Press F5. And what's happening here? Oh yes, so we got hello world. What is your name? And we have a cursor. Now what's happening is that the program is waiting for our input. We use an input function here. So let's type our name, Roberto. And it says, "It is good to meet you, comma, Roberto." So we use concatenation here, and we actually use this input function, which we assign to the variable my name. So something to note real quickly here is that the strings, right, show up in a different color. And when we typed my name out here, we concatenated my name to this string, it showed up in just a plain text color, just to differentiate the fact that this is not an actual literal string, but it is a variable that contains a string. And another thing to notice here is that when the program executed, there was a lot of stuff that came up down here, right? You can see the Python shell executing the file, and it's a bit messy. Now, there's a way to kind of clean this up so it looks a little nicer. We don't need to look at all this stuff every time we run our program. So what we can do is add some lines. So to line 2 and 3, we're going to type import OS and then OS system CLS. So you just put your cursor up here and press enter a couple times so you have some empty lines. Then type import OS, and then below we'll type os.system, and then type in the string CLS right there. Now when we run the program, we'll press F5 again. You'll see that this the screen was cleared before we start, and we can do this again, and yeah, it just looks a little nicer. Now just a quick note about line 1. So up here we have a comment. And comments are notes about the code. And programmers add these in order to make their code more readable and understandable. Now Python ignores comments, so it won't execute anything on those lines. So anything with a number sign after it, basically. Now you can, if you want to, you can even comment out a whole block by selecting it and pressing Control/, and then nothing would run. And then of course press it again and it'll bring it back. So that can be handy if you want to just disable a block of code for a moment for some reason. And we'll look at examples of good commenting later, but proficient commenting is really critical. Any good programmer nowadays has to comment really well and do a good job of that. And next up is functions and arguments. So a quick blurb on these. Functions in computer science, right? They're similar to the functions that you've learned about or are learning about in MCR3U. And really, they take some sort of input and process it and then give you some sort of output in return. Now, functions can be either predefined or built in. So I can click this here, and it's going to bring us to the list of built-in functions. Let's maximize this for a moment. So this is all of the built-in functions that come with Python by default. Now there are lots more functions, but these ones are called the built-in version. Now you can click any of these, like the int function, and it'll bring you to a detailed description of what that function does. And this resource is part of the Python official documentation, docs.python.org. So that's your list of built-in functions. Let's put this back over here, and we'll scroll back down. Yeah, so now functions really are just kind of like little mini programs that do something useful. And you don't really have to know how they work, you just have to know what they do. Now all functions, okay, are called using brackets. So you can see up here the input function has a set of brackets. And even if there's nothing in them, they need to be there to indicate that they're a function, right? These print functions here all have brackets after with the string that they're meant to print. And the thing that goes inside the brackets has a special name. It's called the argument of the function. So an argument is basically a piece of data that the function uses to do its job. So in order to actually print something, you have to pass in a string argument. So all of these have a string argument. Now, of course, print will run just fine without anything in it. What it'll basically do is just make a blank line. So next in the lesson, I've kind of got a line-by-line overview of some of these things. And I've talked about this stuff already, but just a note on input. So the input function also can take a string argument just to give the user a prompt. So for example, if we wanted to go spam equals input, we could open a bracket and type the prompt, enter a number. And what that would do now, the program is asking me to enter a number, and I could just not do that. I could be like, heh, dog. And now the string dog is actually stored in spam. So if I type that, you can see that it's there. And on line 7, what we have here, right, is another thing to mention is that we have an operation as the argument in the print function. And whenever you have that, it means that it's going to get evaluated by Python before it ultimately gets passed into the function. So there's a little picture of this over here, right? So what happens is we start with print, it is good to meet you, plus my name, the concatenation. But once we've typed the name Albert, for example, in for our input, it's going to really be saying plus the string Albert. And of course, the concatenation operation is going to look like this. It is good to meet you, comma, Albert. So what the actual print function receives is this on the bottom. And not this. Now, after the very last line of a program, it terminates or exits, and everything, all the variables, any memory that was used is freed up. But if you run it again, it's going to ask you your name, and you're going to be able to type it in again. And the result would be always different depending on whatever you typed in for your name. So the next thing I want to talk about is variable names. So we'll start with this analogy. Imagine moving into your house and every single label you put on all your boxes was stuff. Right? It'd be a nightmare. You'd have no idea what was in your boxes. And so to avoid that problem when you're coding, you want to put descriptive labels on all your boxes, and all your variable names should likewise be descriptive. So here are some tips for naming your variables. Now, first of all, variable names are case sensitive. So this means that all these different strings are different variables. They would all refer to actually a different memory location. Now, we usually just use all lowercase, however, when we're naming a variable. So if we were to just write apple, then we would want this lowercase version right here. But if there's more than one word, then one way we can do it is we can use something called upper camel case, where we capitalize the first letter of every subsequent word after the first. So, so upper starts with the lowercase, but then camel and case both get an uppercase letter. So this makes it more readable. Right, so for example, right, this variable name, what I had for breakfast this morning, is quite easy to read. It's more readable than, well, with no capitals, what I had for breakfast this morning. This is a convention, right? It's not mandatory, but it's a standard way of writing your variables in Python. Another thing is that shorter variable names are better. So breakfast or even just food this morning is more readable than what I had for breakfast this morning. So keep them short. Now, variables whose values you'll never change are called constants. And this is a separate type of thing, separate type of way of creating a variable. And we use all capital letters to denote these. And there's a special convention for these eventually, but we're going to look at this later. So let's make a constant in VS Code. You notice what happens is if you type in my wage in all capitals, and we'll type equals 10, it actually changes the color of that variable to show that it's a constant, because VS Code recognizes that convention and automatically color codes that. So we would never change this variable in our program because it is a constant. We'll be using these lots as we go along. They're really handy. So that concludes our work with VS Code, and what I want to finish with here is just this last section on Replit. So Replit is the website that we're going to be using to do our work and complete our assignments for the course. So you're going to go to the website Replit, www.replit, and you need to create a username and password, or just log in with your Google account. And once you've logged in, make sure you use your LCH Gmail account. You can go back here to, oh boy, this is changing sizes. Okay, so you can go back here to the bottom of this lesson. You'll see a link here. You can click this link, and this will bring you to my class, and you will join my class. So after that, you're going to see some assignments that are ready to go. I'll show you what those look like. They look like this. So if we go to teacher, for me, I have to click this, and anyway, you should see something like this. And 0.2 A, hello world, B, hello person, C, foodie friends. And so I have 3 assignments that I've created for you to work on as a response to this lesson 0.2. Now these assignments always correspond to the lesson that we've done that day. So so I've assigned some due dates to these lessons, and yours might be different depending on which year you're looking at this, but check these specifically and make sure that you get these done by that due date. So one more thing I should mention is when you want to complete an assignment, you basically click it, and for you it will bring you to the assignment, and it'll actually look like this. And so what you'll have up here is a box to code, just like in VS Code, where you can type your program. Down here is a little terminal, which is already running Python. So you can test things here, and it will also show you your program's output. This is a really fast platform, so you'll notice when I run this, it comes up almost instantly. Of course, it's not now because I'm recording a video, but normally this is very quick. Over here on the right is the instructions that I've written for you. So this is welcome to your first ICS3U assignment. For this assignment, you'll simply output the following text. And so really you need to just print this. This is what your program should do. And for each assignment, there's a series of input-output tests that are triggered when you click submit. And so what this means is that my test will automatically give your program some input and test what your program outputs based on that input. So because of that, it's very important that you follow the exact format that I present here. So all the letters, capitals, lowercase, uppercase letters, and that you see need to be exactly right. Okay, and the spacing of things doesn't matter so much, but what matters is like that is the rest, that everything's output the exact same way. Yeah. Good luck with your assignments for this section, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.